Hello guys, so this is chapter number 2. This chapter deals with the resources as it is written in the top of the chapter topic, that is land, soil, water, vegetation and wildlife resources, right? Now let's start with the land. Now it says that 30% of the earth is covered by the land, and in that 30% of land 90% of population lives in just 30% of land, right? So that equates that 90% of human population lives on just 10% of earth, right? And rest is like sparsely populated, right? So interesting fact to know. Now, the use of land for different purposes like agriculture, industrial application, it's known as the land use, right? So if we see the land use pattern in selected countries, like very interesting to see that Australia has as high as 56% pasture area, right? Although its forest area is mere 14%, less than that of India. Next, if we see, India has one of the highest land use under cropland. That is 57 to 60% of India is cropland, right? Very interesting. Japan has as high as 67%. Two-thirds of Japan is forest. My God, that is unimaginable, right? So that was about Japan. And again, if we see about countries like USA and France, they have a really well balanced distribution of land use, right? So it was interesting to see this kind of graph. And for world, it's like 11% of the land is used by cropland, 26% by the pasture and 31% by the forest. We have to increase the area under the forest, right? All right. Now, conservation of land resources. Therefore, the present rate of degradation of land resources must be checked. Afforestation, land reclamation, regulated use of chemical pesticides and fertilizers, and checks on overgrazing are some of the common methods used to conserve land, right? Next is the landslide. What is landslide? Landslide are simply defined as the mass movements of rock, debris, or earths down the slope. They often take place in conjunction with the earthquake, floods, and volcanoes. A prolonged spell of rainfall can cause a heavy landslide that can block the flow of river. Once blocked, the downstream can get like heavy burst of water once that the blocked part is cleared by the accumulation of water for days in the upstream, right? Even dams in the downstream area may get the dams may get broken away because of a huge, the tremendous influx of water, right? Some of the mitigation mechanisms are like hazard mapping, locate areas prone to the landslides, and hence such areas can be avoided for building settlements, right? For example, northeast is like a very prone area, right? So construction of retention wall to stop land from slipping. Increase in the vegetation cover is an effective way to arrest the landslide, and the surface drainage control works are implemented to control the movement of landslide along with the rainwater and spring flows, right? Next is weathering. Weathering, the breaking up and the decay of the exposed rocks by temperature changes, frost actions, plants and animals and man is known as weathering. Okay. Now, weathering plus the movement of the weathered material is erosion, right? What is soil? The thin layer of the grainy substance covering the surface of earth is known as soil, right? Now, if we see the profile, the soil profile, the top soil with humus and vegetation Just below that we have the subsoil with sand, silt, and clay. Below that we have the weathered rock material, and the deepest is the parent rock, right? The virgin parent rock, not weathered. Very importantly, what are some of the factors which affect the soil formation? So the parent rock, relief, flora flora microorganism, temperature and time. Sorry, climate and time, right? So these are factors which affect the soil formation. In fact, the color, texture, chemical properties, mineral content and permeability, all parts come from the parent rock. The altitude and slope determine the accumulation of soil. The macroorganisms affect the rate of humus formation and hence the soil. The time determines the thickness of soil profile, and climate, that is the temperature, rainfall influence. It influences the rate of weathering, right? After that, a very important topic of the degradation of soil and conservation measures, right? So here are like 7 to 8 important ways how we can, conserve soil, right? So first is mulching. The bare ground between the plant is covered with a layer of organic matter like straw. It helps to retain the soil moisture. Next is the contour barriers. The stones, grass, soils are used to build the barriers along the contours, and the trenches are made in front of the barrier to recollect the water, right? Stone, grass, soils are used to build barriers along the contours. So the contour barriers, they are of two kinds. First is either it can be dead contour barrier, or it can be a live contour barrier using plants, right? Next is a rock dam. Rocks are piled up to slow down the flow of water. This prevents the gullies and further soil loss, as you can see in the picture here. Next is terrace farming. These are made on the steep slopes so that the flat surface are available to grow the crops. They can reduce the surface runoff and soil erosion, right? Intercropping, this is terrace farming. Intercropping, different crops are grown in alternate rows and are sown at different times to protect the soil from rain wash, right? For example, if you are growing mangoes, so the area between the two rows of the mango field, you can plow like genda, so that that area may not face erosion. Next we have contour ploughing. Plowing parallel to the contours of a hill slope to form a natural barrier for water to flow down the slope, right? That is contour ploughing. So contour plowing parallel to the contours of a hill slope to form a natural barrier for water to flow down the slope, right? So see, parallel to the contours of hill slope, right? So if we plow along the hill slope, the water will not, the there won't be natural barrier for water to stop, or the soil erosion to stop, right? So we discussed mulching, we discussed contour barriers, right? We understand contour barriers such as it either can be stones, right, which is the dead barrier. It either can be live contour barrier. For example, grass works very well to hold the soil, right? Then rock dams to prevent gullification. That is, the rocks are piled up to slow down the flow of the water. This prevents gullies and further soil loss. Terrace farming is well known. Then is intercropping. Okay. Inter means in between. Next, contour plowing. We got to know plowing parallel to the contours, right? Across the contour, not along the contour, right? And then shelter belts. Rows of trees are planted to check the wind movement to protect the soil cover, right? So very interestingly, we covered these. Okay, so another important thing is about contour drainage, right? So slopes, we dig a drainage, and through drainage, the water, seeps in, right? And we pave even the drainage with, rocks, right? So that was about the degradation and the conservation measure of soil. Moving on to water, only 1% of fresh water is available and fit for human use, right? So very important fact. A very important fact that a dipping water tap wastes as high as 1200 liters in a year, and average Indian uses about 135 liters of water every day, right? And there has been growing cases of water market, right? Saurashtra is a region which, where this water market, that is a city completely takes all of its water from nearby city or town, right? So these are some of the methods of conservation of water resources, right? On an average, one spell of rain for 2 hours is enough to save 8,000 liters of water. Okay? Next, we move to natural vegetation and wildlife. So, in biosphere, living beings are interrelated and interdependent on each other for survival. The life supporting system is known as the ecosystem. Okay? And natural vegetation and wildlife exist only in the narrow zone of contact between the lithosphere, hydrosphere, and atmosphere. And we call it the biosphere, right? Very interestingly, diclofenac is one of the a life-saving drug given to cattle, fishes, etc. When these cattle die and the carcasses are eaten, consumed by the vultures, there is a kidney failure of the vultures, and hence diclofenac has caused a near extinction of the vultures, but somehow the vultures are protected in captivity, right? So these things needs to be we need to work on. We need to ban these chemicals, these drugs, right? Finally, coming to some of the methods. Before that, let's discuss some of the glossaries, like what is a national park. A national park is a designated area to protect the ecological integrity of one or more ecosystems for present and future generations. What is a biosphere reserve? Series of protected areas linked through global network intended to demonstrate the relationship between conservation and development. What is CITES? The Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species of Wild Fauna and Flora is an international agreement between the governments, right? So it aims to ensure that the international trade in specimen of the wild animals and plants doesn't threaten their survival, right? So some of the methodology, some of the things like awareness programs like social forestry and One Mahotsav should be encouraged at the regional and community level. School children should be encouraged for bird watching and visiting natural camp so that they appreciate the habitat of varied species, right? So this is all about the beautiful chapter, right? We learned about what is soil. We learned about how different countries' land use pattern was very interesting to know, right? We learned the soil profile, the general soil profile. We learned what are some of the factors, the 5 factors of soil formation, roughly 8 methods how we can prevent the soil from getting degraded. Water, the figures in water was very interesting to know. Some of the terminologies related to, national park biosphere reserves and a international body known as sites. And finally, some of the interesting methods like Van Mahotsav, an awareness program, and encouraging school children for natural camps, bird watching can really help, sensitize the problem. That's all. Thank you.